Alarms tore through the station before I even opened my eyes. I was thrown against the wall of my quarters as the whole structure shuddered, metal groaning like something alive and dying at the same time. Red light pulsed through the room. A voice on the intercom repeated the same words over and over, flat and mechanical, telling everyone to move to the nearest shelter point. I did not need the voice to tell me what was happening. I could feel it in the floor. Something had struck the outer hull. My name is Vesik Threnoliu. I am a researcher, not a fighter, and in that first second, I did the only thing my training had ever prepared me for. I froze, and I counted my exits, and I realized there was only one, and it was already filling with smoke. The corridor outside my quarters was chaos. Sparks fell from a cracked ceiling panel. Somewhere far off, metal was being torn apart, slow and terrible, like teeth working through bone. I pressed myself against the wall and tried to remember the layout of the station, tried to think past the pounding of 4 hearts I did not know I had until that moment, all beating in different rhythms, none of them steady. A door blew inward at the end of the hallway. Through the smoke came men in dark armor, faces hidden behind visors, weapons raised. Raiders. I had heard of ships like theirs, ghost crews that struck research outposts on the edge of nowhere, looking for tech, for hostages, for anything that could be sold. I had never imagined I would be standing in a burning hallway while one of them turned his weapon toward me. I did not move. I could not move. Every part of my body had gone still with a fear so complete, it felt like being frozen in ice. Then someone grabbed my arm and pulled me sideways through a maintenance hatch just as the wall behind me exploded into fragments. I hit the floor of a narrow service tunnel, ears ringing, dust falling around me like slow rain. A hand was still gripping my arm, steady despite everything falling apart around us. It was a man, human, tall, dark-haired, a security uniform torn at the shoulder, blood on his jaw from a cut I did not have time to worry about yet. His eyes found mine in the dim emergency light, and even with the station coming apart around us, even with weapons firing somewhere close, he looked at me the way you look at something you cannot quite believe you are seeing. I did not have time to wonder what that look meant. He was already pulling me forward. His name, I would learn later, was Ethan Cole. In that moment, he was only a hand on my arm, and a voice cutting through the noise, telling me to move, to keep low, to trust him. We ran. The tunnel twisted through the guts of the station, past pipes hissing steam, past emergency lights flickering on and off like a heartbeat losing its rhythm. Behind us, I heard boots on metal, heavy and unhurried, the sound of hunters who were not worried about losing their prey. "They are following us," I said, my voice shaking in a way I did not like. "I know." He did not slow down. "There's an escape pod bay 2 decks down. If we can reach it before they cut off the stairwell, we get off this station alive." "And if we cannot?" He glanced back at me, and for one strange second, in the middle of all that danger, something in his expression softened, just slightly. Just enough for me to notice it even through my fear. "Then I guess I die next to the most interesting person I've ever met," he said. "Could be worse." I did not understand how he could make a joke while running for his life. I did not have time to ask. The tunnel opened into a maintenance stairwell, and the moment we stepped through, gunfire echoed from above, sparks raining down where a shot struck the railing beside my head. Ethan pulled me down behind a support beam, his body angled between me and the stairs above, one arm raised, firing back with a weapon I had not even seen him draw. The sound was enormous in that enclosed space, sharp enough that I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. "Stay behind me," he said, voice tight but calm, the calm of someone who had done this before and hated that he had to do it again. "I am a scientist," I said, absurdly, as if that fact could stop what was happening. "I study xenobiology. I do not know how to survive this." "You don't have to know how," he said, firing another shot, forcing the raiders back around the corner above us. "You just have to stay with me. I'll handle the rest." There was no time to question why a stranger would risk his life so completely for someone he barely knew. The stairwell shook as something heavy slammed into the deck above, and dust rained down, and the lights along the wall stuttered and died, plunging us into a darkness broken only by the flashes of gunfire. Down, Ethan said, and we went, taking the next 2 flights fast, half falling in places, my hands scraping against cold metal railings, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard it hurt. At the bottom of the stairwell, the corridor branched in 3 directions. Ethan paused only long enough to check a display on his wrist, then pulled me left, into a passage lit by a single flickering strip of light. "This leads to the pod bay," he said. "We are close." Behind us, a voice shouted something in a language I did not recognize, harsh and urgent. More boots, closer now. I risked a glance back and saw shapes moving through the smoke, 3 of them, maybe 4, closing the distance with the patience of people who knew exactly where the exits led. "They know where we are going," I said. "Yeah," Ethan did not sound surprised, "which means we need a new plan." He grabbed a fire suppression panel on the wall and tore it open, exposing a tangle of wires and a manual release switch. Without hesitation, he threw it. Somewhere above us, a low groan echoed through the station, and then a wall of white foam and mist burst from the ceiling behind us, filling the corridor with a thick cloud that swallowed the raiders' shouts entirely. "That will not stop them for long," I said. "It doesn't need to." He was already moving again, pulling me with him. "It just needs to slow them down enough." We burst through a final door into the pod bay, a wide circular room lined with small emergency pods, most of them already launched, their berths standing empty and dark. Only one remained, its hatch open, waiting. Ethan shoved me toward it. "Get in." "What about you?" "I'm right behind you." I climbed into the narrow pod, my hands trembling as I found the harness, and I turned just in time to see the door at the far end of the bay burst open. 2 raiders stepped through, weapons raised, and Ethan spun to meet them, firing before they could aim, forcing them to scatter behind a bank of storage lockers. "Ethan!" "I'm coming," he shouted, backing toward the pod, still firing, each shot precise, controlled, buying seconds that felt like they cost him everything. A shot grazed his shoulder and he staggered, and for one terrible moment I thought he would fall, but he caught himself against the pod's frame and threw himself inside beside me, slamming his palm against the emergency seal. The hatch closed with a hiss, just as something struck the outer hull of the pod hard enough to rock us sideways. "Launch sequence," Ethan gasped, blood soaking through the shoulder of his uniform, his hand shaking as he reached for the controls. "Now." The pod shuddered, then tore free of the station with a force that pressed me back into my seat, the world outside the small viewport spinning as we shot away from the burning wheel of metal that had been my home for the past several weeks. Through the glass, I watched the station recede, fires blooming along its hull like flowers made of light, and I felt something in my chest break loose, a fear so large it had no proper shape until now, released all at once into something closer to grief. "We made it," Ethan said, breathing hard, leaning his head back against the seat. "We actually made it." I turned to him and saw the blood soaking through his sleeve, dark and steady, and my training finally caught up with the moment. "You are hurt," I said, already reaching for the small medical kit bolted beside my seat. "Do not move. It's not as bad as it looks." That is exactly what people say, right before it turns out to be very bad. I tore open a sealing patch and pressed it against the wound, and he hissed through his teeth but did not pull away. "Hold still. Bossy," he said, though there was no complaint in his voice, only something warmer, something that made my hands slow for just a moment, before I remembered myself and kept working. For a while, neither of us spoke. The pod drifted in silence, the emergency beacon pulsing somewhere behind the console, calling for rescue across the dark. Outside, the station burned smaller and smaller, until it was only a point of orange light among 1,000 points of white, indistinguishable from the stars, unless you already knew where to look. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. "You did not have to come back for me." Wasn't a hard choice. He watched me finish sealing the patch, his eyes steady despite the pain I could see in the tightness around his mouth. "I saw you frozen in that hallway, and I wasn't about to leave you there. You do not even know me. I know enough." He shifted slightly, careful of his shoulder, and something in his expression changed, softened, the way it had for that strange half-second back in the burning tunnel. I've been on this station for 3 weeks. I've seen you in the lab, running tests nobody else wanted to run, staying late when everyone else went to eat. I've seen the way you look at every new sample like it's the most fascinating thing you've ever touched. You don't know you do that. It's kind of amazing to watch. I did not know how to answer that. I had spent so many years assuming that my face, my strange four-eyed face with its sideways mouth, was the only thing anyone from his species would ever notice about me, and notice with discomfort at that. I had built my whole understanding of how humans saw me around that assumption, brick by careful brick, and here he was, dismantling it in the middle of a burning escape with nothing more than a few plain sentences. "You are being kind because we almost died," I said. "That is a common reaction. Adrenaline creates false intimacy. I have read about it." Ethan laughed, a short, surprised sound, wincing slightly as it pulled at his wound. "You really do read everything, don't you?" "It is how I understand things. I cannot otherwise explain." "Well, explain this then." He turned toward me as much as the narrow seat allowed, his eyes steady on mine. All four of mine, without a trace of the flinch I had spent my whole life learning to expect. "I've been trying to work up the nerve to talk to you for 2 weeks. Not because the station was about to blow up. Because every time I saw you, I forgot what I was going to say. That does not sound like a security officer's typical behavior." "No," he agreed, "it really doesn't." The pod drifted on, and somewhere in the black, a proper rescue ship would eventually find the beacon and pull us in, and this small, strange moment between two people who had nearly died together would become a story told later, softened by time, but for now, it was only this. His eyes on mine, my hands still faintly trembling from the run, the station, a dying ember behind us, and ahead, nothing but stars, and the quiet hum of a small engine keeping us alive. "On my world," I said slowly, "faces like mine are simply faces, nothing more. But I have seen the surveys. I have seen where my species ranks among the others when it comes to what other species consider pleasant to look at. It is not high. I made my peace with that a long time ago." "Vesic," he said my name carefully, like it mattered to get it exactly right. "I don't care what a survey says. I watched you run through fire tonight with your whole face full of fear, and I have never in my life seen anything as remarkable as you in that moment. Not before, not since. You want to know the truth? I think you might be the most beautiful person I've ever met. And I'm not saying that because we survived something together. I was already thinking it 3 weeks ago, the first time I saw you laugh at something in the lab when you thought nobody was watching." I stared at him, searching his face for the 11 expressions I had catalogued over years of careful, painful observation, the flinch, the too quick recovery, the overly polite discomfort dressed up as tolerance. I found none of them. I found only steadiness, and a kind of open, unguarded honesty that I did not have a category for yet, because no one had ever offered it to me before. "I do not know what to say to that," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything." He reached over, slow and careful, the same way he had reached for my arm in the burning hallway, and let his fingers rest near mine, on the narrow console between our seats, not quite touching, waiting to see if I would close the distance myself. I just figured, given everything that happened tonight, life's too short to keep it to myself. Outside, the beacon continued its steady pulse into the dark, a small heartbeat calling out for rescue, and somewhere far behind us, the station that had nearly killed us both burned itself quiet against the black. I looked down at his hand resting near mine, and then at his face, at the cut along his jaw, and the exhaustion in his eyes, and the strange, stubborn warmth underneath all of it. And for the first time since the alarms had torn through my sleep, I felt something in my chest unclench completely. I moved my hand the rest of the way, and let it rest against his. 3 weeks, I said. You watched me for 3 weeks and said nothing. In my defense, he said, a tired smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. There was never a good time. Turns out the good time was during a raider attack. Go figure. I found myself laughing, a real laugh, startled out of me by how absurd the whole night had been, how close we had come to never having this conversation at all. My jaw unhinged sideways the way it always did when I laughed without thinking about it first, and I caught myself, out of old habit, ready to close it again, ready to hide it the way I always had around people who were not my own kind. Ethan only smiled wider. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't do that. I like it. I like all of it." I let my jaw stay where it was. Far ahead, a light appeared against the black, small and growing steadily brighter, a ship answering the beacon's call, cutting through the dark toward us with the promise of safety, and warm rooms, and people who would ask us 100 questions about what had happened on the station. There would be time for all of that soon enough. Reports to write, wounds to properly treat, a whole long process of accounting for everything that had been lost. But for now, in the narrow quiet of a small escape pod drifting between the wreck of one home and the promise of rescue, I sat with my hand in his, my strange face unhidden for the first time in longer than I could remember, and I understood, finally, that some kinds of beauty had never needed anyone's approval but the right person's honest eyes. The ship grew closer, its lights sweeping slowly across the black, and Ethan Cole did not let go of my hand once, not even when the docking clamps locked into place, not even when the hatch finally opened to a wash of bright light and worried voices calling our names. We had run from fire together, and somewhere in the middle of that running, without either of us planning it, we had found something neither of us was willing to let go of again.